Ah, it works.
Hello.
You can even hear me, right? I can hear
I
you.
can hear you right. Yes, good. Sorry about that. I had a bit of an issue getting Zoom to launch, but there we go. How are you doing, Frodo? Right?
This is significantly better quality than our Monday meetings in terms of your audio and video.
Yeah, for some reason, Google is the only time I have any problems. So when I use Teams or Zoom or even Discord, the audio quality and the video quality is much better. So I don't know quite what's going on there. In particular, the feedback thing. So for some reason, all of Google's things pick up the microphone and have that annoying feedback loop where you can hear yourself talk, but it doesn't appear to happen anywhere else. So maybe we should move to Zoom for our Monday meetings as well.
I got an invitation to around.co.
Yeah.
Well, I applied and I have a friend who was in, but that seems to be a new, I'll just put in chat. That's, we should probably talk, where chat there. Participants, oh, there it is. It's probably something we should discuss actually in our Monday meeting, but because it's a whole new tech. Anyway.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Oh, yeah, we could give it a go, couldn't we?
Yeah, I'll just have to try.
Is it actually open?
No, but you can apply, but of course that's a bit slow. I don't know why they're being so slow with rolling out. Now it's not at the time they should be rolling out.
Although I don't know, I'm not quite sure I like the idea of reducing people to tiny little bubbles floating around my screen, kind of. But anyway.
I think it's partly that screen share becomes something else. It becomes integrated into the thing, and
yeah.
So
yeah.
So
anyway.
I got an email this morning from Les.
Yeah.
It was one of those he sent to all of us PhD people asking, saying, here's a link, you can sign up for session. So of course, instantly I signed up for session Monday morning, right after our session.
Okay.
So that'll be interesting.
Good. All right.
Got it on the red wine already.
Oh no, this is if only, right? If only the weekend began on Friday morning. I got a full day today. I've got to finish marking all my machine learning dissertations. I've got a thesis or two to write, as well as some stuff to do with admissions. So yeah, unfortunately, I'm definitely not going on holiday until tomorrow, or in fact, probably Sunday morning, at the rate things are going.
You just said something. I have to bring a book in. Are you familiar with this book and these people?
No, I don't think so. No.
I'm only through the first quarter or so. It's my friend Bruce Horn works with these guys now. He was the guy who wrote the first Finder for the first Macintosh.
Oh, right.
And he says their approach to AI is really, really interesting. And the first quarter of the book is basically machine learning is statistics. Well, not statistics, but pattern matching, as you know. Yeah. But I thought as an extension, you may find it interesting.
Okay. So do they look like they had some sort of ethical perspective, or?
Very much so. Well, just put the name of the chat. Completely out of my field. I have no clue. It's just he's so big onto this. And he's a pretty clever guy, so anyway. So how do you mark ML projects?
It's really difficult because they don't follow a standard scientific method, right? If you follow the standard scientific method with machine learning, you'll just get nowhere. It's so exploratory. So the problem is the method, as far as I can tell, for doing any kind of machine learning task is you try and pick a process that you think could be applicable. You clean the data as best you can. You push it through the system, and then you sort of endlessly tweak things and try and get it as close as you can to something that's appropriate. But there's no way of really answering the question, well, why is that weight set at 0.6 and not 0.65? Or why do you need a middle layer with 20 nodes rather than 15 nodes? There's kind of no answer really. So yeah, they're quite frustrating to do really. And the other problem you get is there's a lot of existing libraries and things out there. So the students are taking stuff that already exists and kind of plugging it together. And it's quite difficult to know, without having a kind of a deep technical understanding of what they've actually done, how sophisticated it is what they've done, right? You know, have they literally just fired it up and pointed it out a data set, or have they actually had to do something and intervene in some way? So yeah, they're incredibly frustrating. They annoy the hell out of me. And I get something like 10 of these things to mark every year. But yeah, there you go. That's the age we live in, right? It's just so much hype around it. So they all want to do it. It's markedly different for third year projects, where I don't get machine learning third year projects. I get people who are interested in games, hypertext, mixed reality systems and those kind of things. And they're much, much more interesting to supervise.
Are you a fan of Harry Potter? I am not, but.
Not especially. My oldest loves Harry Potter, but so yeah.
It just sounds very much like this is how wizards are marked.
Yeah, I need you're suggesting that rather than sit here and painfully read all these bloody dissertations about CNNs and RNNs and RTLSNs and all the rest of it, I should just have some kind of dissertation sorting hat, right?
One.
I wish. Anyway, we should talk about you. So, what I should do. So
it's moving towards PhD, but just a quick thing. I shared an article on Twitter from Wired magazine called AI is a hang on. Oh, what was it called? Very relevant to everything here. AI is an ideology, not a technology. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, it could be. I was explaining to somebody from, I co-supervise with somebody who's from English, the head of English actually. And we were talking about the whole AI thing, because I was moaning about these dissertations. And I said, the thing about AI, of course, is AI goes through these sort of perpetual summers and winters, right? So we're currently in the summer. And as far as I can tell, the cycle goes that some breakthrough is made, an enormous amount of money gets funneled into it. That breakthrough gets thoroughly exploited until technically it's, you know, until the improvements are now incremental again, at which point all of the money and excitement fades away. And we spend about 10 years figuring out what to do with that technology and applying it and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And we just seem to continuously go through this process. And to be honest, I can't wait to get on to the next bit, right? I'm thoroughly fed up of the current, the current maxima.
I think that is very true and very interesting. And I'm going to give you a link now, because now we're segueing into my work, both related to PhD and otherwise.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I think.
Oops. Yeah. We're breaking up a bit.
Oh, okay.
Nope, still a bit brokey.
Okay, as far as I can tell, everything hasn't changed. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, you're back now. You're back.
Okay, all right. Blame BT. Okay, well, let's talk about you, because I've only got till sort of 11. So, okay. So first of all, I have emailed. I've had the world's slowest conversation with Les and Wendy, right? Where we basically, since you emailed me, I think we've exchanged like 1 or 2 messages a week, right? Gradually, it's like slouching towards Bethlehem. So I think where we're getting is the proposal is that I come in as a relatively small slice, so maybe like 20% or something. So Les would stay obviously as the primary supervisor. It's not quite clear what would happen with Wendy. I think that's what we're waiting for at the moment. Do you want Wendy to stay involved?
You see, just to tell you a little bit about me to answer that question. Right. I'm the kind of person who forgives people. It's not, sometimes of course it's a good thing, but it's not always a good thing. It's just that, it's funny, if someone falls and hurts their knee, I don't necessarily have an empathy where I squeach and go, oh no, like I watch a movie, someone's head's blown off. I know it's a movie. I don't go like, oh my God, what happened? However, I have this general feeling of everyone is in a difficult position and everyone is nice. So when it comes to Wendy, I love and adore her to an extent. She is that kind of person, right?
Yeah.
But I know that she's also very manipulative, very busy. I mean, seeing her say to me completely inappropriately, but you know, I love you, in a meeting, and then as I leave, another student comes in and I hear the same sentence. It's just a joke. If it had been the reverse male-female, it would have been an issue. You know, and that's fine. That's just her actually trying to be pleasant, no problem. So if she'd like to stay on board and do no work, of course I'd be honored to have her. She's the one who gave me this opportunity.
Okay.
But if she would rather wash her hands, I'm not going to hate her for it either. So I honestly don't care, but it's a positive don't care.
Okay.
Rather, I don't mind, I think the British phrase is.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, so I think the likelihood is that it'll be something like Les at 70, me at 20, and Wendy at 10 or something. And I kind of see my role as trying to help you do something concrete and kind of and move forward with the kind of the practical aspects and those kind of things. Yeah. So given that, so I'm just gonna let me make a note. I've got my notes here. So whereabouts are you in the process, Freddie? Because we've obviously, I've seen you a few times as an examiner, right?
Yeah, I submitted my 9. I had to do some corrections to that. I sent that in. I'm not sure if it went past Les, but I should be past my 9. I am now, according to Les, working on my upgrade paper, which I have submitted.
Okay.
He came back with all sorts of things, la, la, la.
Yeah.
You were the one who then suggested expert review, which to me makes complete sense because the experts are actually the people who would use it and they are the people in our field.
Yeah.
That seems to have been approved. So I've written up an outline for an experts panel session because I don't know what that would mean.
Well, okay. Let's talk through it gradually. We'll get to that. So I just want to make sure I understand kind of where you are. So you're right at the 18-month point, right, in terms of the process, which is the transfer viable, but you haven't submitted that, right?
I've submitted something to Wendy and Les, which I haven't really heard anything on, but it seems.
So you have a draft, right?
Yeah, you could call it a draft.
Okay.
So,
and the discussion that we're having is really, at the end of that, you're expected to lay out the kind of plan that will take you to a thesis, right? And that's kind of what this discussion is about then, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And because when did you actually start? What was your start date?
When we were young.
What year?
I actually don't know. Hang on.
I could look it up. But actually, I probably can't look it up because I'm not listed with you yet. So
It should be under on my own website now. 2016.
2016. And are you? What's your status in terms of part-time, full-time, all that kind of thing?
Full-time, believe it or not.
Full-time. Okay. So you're well behind where you should be.
Yes.
Right. You're forking out for this, aren't you? You're self-funded.
Nope.
No, you've got to.
Wendy's giving me full scholarship. I even get some money. Not a lot, but I do get money.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm less annoyed then about you being 4 years in, but even so, that's not great. So in terms of a submission deadline, have you had a conversation with the graduate school about where you are? Let's not poke that dragon, right? I suspect you're almost at the stage where you have to start fighting the graduate school because they get really angry if you miss these deadlines by too much. Although you're in a good position, as it were, because the thing that fends them off is if you can demonstrate progress, right? So if you were in the position where you can hand in and pass a transfer viva, that will make them go away for a bit, right? So that's fine. Okay, all right. I can fill in the rest of that later.
Are you on PGR Tracker or writing your own notes?
No, I'm just making some notes. So I always find that whenever you talk to PhD students, it's always really important that you know exactly where they are in the process, right? Otherwise, you can give them some really bad advice. So this is why I'm asking you these questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, good.
All right. So I understand kind of where we are then and what the purpose is. So before we talk about any kind of practical stuff about methodology, obviously I know quite a bit about your background and about Liquid, and I also know about your kind of the things you're excited about in there. What I don't know about, I suppose, is how you've articulated that as research, right? Because you kind of have you kind of have a very strong narrative about wanting to change people's perspectives about what writing is and what scholarly hypertext might be. But yeah, so your research. So what would you say that your research objective is? Your kind of high level statement, and do you have a set of research questions that you actually want to ask?
I do. It's basically about how can we use hypertextuality to get that field into it. How can we use hypertextuality to augment the academic process on current workflows, i.e. PDF? That's basically the question.
So let me write that down. So how
can we best, how can hypertextuality improve the academic process? That's it, actually. Because the academic process now includes being on PDF.
Okay, and so two things to define there, right? So one is, what do you mean by hypertextuality? And the other one is, what do you mean by the academic process?
Yes, so in my longer papers, I have written the history of citations. Yeah. I have pulled down why we cite from various sources, including Southampton, the point of citation, all that stuff, because actually, I just have to tell you the thing I'm working on right now, because otherwise my head will explode. It's super relevant to this.
Yeah.
So, one thing that Doug thought was really important is high resolution addressability, of course.
Yeah.
A link to a paragraph. Les says not interesting at all from a student writing to a teacher, because he wants me to paraphrase the document and so on. So that's the kind of thing that I'm learning through this process that is really, really important. So I had to change how author handles citations to deal with that, which is great. However, what we're building right now, you've seen the glossary, which still needs some tweaking, but the extension of visual meta and all of that is so cool. So you've also seen, you read a document, you click on the citation number, and up pops a little information box, right?
Yep, I've seen that.
So in there will be a thing, this hasn't been defined, this is part of the process, a thing that you can click on, and what will happen, obviously if you click on a DOI, it'll do a web search and all that stuff. But it'll first look on your hard drive to see if you have that document locally. If you don't, it'll search the web. But if you have it locally or on your hard drive, doesn't really matter, it'll find it, present it to you in Reader.
Yeah.
And then it will open it to the right page and draw a little flashing box around any cited passage.
Okay, so it's looking, when you say cited passage, do you mean what, cited in as a range, or cited as a quotation, or what do you mean?
As a quotation. So
okay.
if someone quotes a specific bit on a page, it'll just, because PDF is awful, I can't even select the text, it's horrible. Right. I can do a rounding, a box, because it's basically a graphics format. It just flashes, this is where it was on the page.
So you can select a quotation, it will try its best to find that document.
Yeah, so you, as let's say you are the original author.
Yeah.
You write a document, save it with visual meta. I then read that document, and there's a bit that I want to cite, so I select a bit of your text, copy it, go into author and paste it. When that exported, it looked like a normal citation. And then when Les reads the document now, he clicks on the little number, up comes the information, and there you can click. And if you have that, if he already has that document, he'll open the document to the right page and flash the bit that I originally selected. Okay,
got you. And what do you call that feature?
We're using the current language. We're probably going to call it deep linking. But it's just the half of it is something that I developed in dialogue with Mark Anderson and Chris Guttridge in the early years, which was wonderful, which is robust addressability.
Yeah.
But I think that web links break. DOIs are also fragile, very useful, but fragile. Searching by title and name is not robust because it can be faked and so on. So the whole point is to give users multiple ways to get to the same thing.
What? I'll ask you a mean question now. What's the difference between robust addressability as you've defined it and what Adobe is currently doing with machine learning to provide structure onto PDFs?
Oh, it's quite different because structure in a PDF is...
sorry, I know they're functionally different, but in terms of the ideology,
right?
Because you kind of, yeah.
So in this Wired article, just a heading that AI is an ideology, I think is really important. This is actually answering your question. I believe that if you ask Siri, Alexa or something, they will give you one thing. That's the God truth. I believe that in knowledge work, interaction is what's key. To be able to see things from a different angle. Is it really that? And was it that for a period of time and so on? So ML, to extract meaning out of a PDF, of course it's great and useful. But what I'm trying to do is provide a transparently easy way for an author to add value, metadata, context, whatever you want to call it, and then provide the tools for the human user to be able to go in and choose to look at it this way or that way. And that includes how they open a link or a connection or a citation or a quote.
Yeah, okay. So your argument of why they're different is, so both of them are about using machine learning to replace structure. That's why I asked the question, right?
No, this is not, what I'm doing is not ML at all.
Well, all right. So it kind of is, right? It's using an algorithm to replace structure. Let's put it that way, right? The type of algorithm doesn't matter. Because what you're doing is you're saying, I will go and find something that I think is the thing that's being referenced dynamically at runtime. So if you ask me tomorrow, I might find something else. And then when I load it up, I will try and find the thing in there that matches the thing you've quoted, right? And if I find a different version of the document, which has slightly different formatting, I might find it differently. But so it's a kind of just-in-time dynamic referencing system, right?
I think the issue is in the category of addressing.
Yeah.
This is something that really matured in my brain when my son was born, because he would point, and he would point at buttons differently.
Yeah.
Right. So to be able, you can't address something, you can't address it. So, like this book, there are many ways I can address it. I can say the book over here, the book we just talked about, all that stuff. So we obviously agree on that. But what this approach is trying to do, if you have to go look on Google for the document, then it's out of my hands. Everything you said is exactly that. Yeah. But I'm trying to provide the minimal structure that if it is on your hard drive, because
but you're automating. But you're just okay. We may be going too deep into this because it's not kind of the point. But I was just intrigued as to. I'm not saying they're the same. I wanted to get at the essence of what's different. So why is it okay for you to say, actually, I'm going to throw out the idea of structure and static addressing, right? It's just not appropriate. Whereas for Adobe to say we're going to throw out the idea of fixed structure in a document, it's not appropriate. Why is it okay in one case and not in the other one? And it sounds to me that what you're saying is that actually you're taking a philosophical position against static addressing, right? You're basically saying, look, what you want to do is you want to, in a sense, go back to the way that we used to do it. So if you look at the way that we used to address things in a reference, we would give enough information that you would be able to search and find that thing, right? And you're saying, rather than replace that with a static reference, replace it with an automated system which searches and finds that thing for you, right? And that has a number of advantages, right? Because it's robust, which is in the name, and it reflects your actual workflow as well, right? In that you're not only finding the thing itself, but you're actually taking someone directly to the thing, to the passage within the text. Yeah, it seems to me what you're doing. You're taking a philosophical position.
That's very interesting. I feel I'm taking a pragmatic position.
Yeah, You are, but I think you're inadvertently going back to the way that, you know, the way that we used to do things, but you're just automating that rather than replacing it with fixed addressing.
Fixed addressing is fine when it works.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, I understand that.
yeah. So like in the olden, no, this is not a disagreement, but just in terms of context, like in the olden days, you would call a house, not a person.
Yeah,
Right now you'll call a person, but the person may have left the device in the other room, right?
yeah,
So these are all ways to do linking. Like a web link is not a link, it's a direction, right? So that's an interesting part of it. But the really exciting thing for me is actually the structure bit,
yeah,
where if you have this document on your hard drive or cloud or whatever,
yeah,
it opens it for you.
yeah.
That's really important.
Yes. So I think, okay, so this comes down to a comment I would have about what you need to do with your work, or rather the danger that's involved in your work, which is that you need to be very careful that you don't talk about features, right? Because features and the implementation of features, although they're very valuable, they're completely out of scope for a PhD, right? They're not just not interesting in a research context like that.
Yeah.
What is interesting is first of all the motivation for those features. So why do they exist, and what are you saying, right? And the second thing is then the impact of those features, and whether or not they work, right? In other words, the features are a vessel by which you can test the ideas. So you have an idea. So for example, your idea is, I don't want to do static addressing for scholarly work. It's not appropriate, right? What I want to do is I want to go back to a dynamic addressing system, which is very robust, and also provide this additional element, which is to jump to the passage within the text, right, directly, right? And I'm going to replace the static system with that. So that's your idea. Deep linking, or robust addressability, whatever you want to call it, is your feature that embodies that and enables you to test that idea, right? And then the question at the end is, first of all, does your feature actually embody the idea properly? You need to try and demonstrate that. And then secondly, what impact does it have? And it lets you say something about the idea. And that's the way that you'll push the ideas forward, if you like. So the features are important, but only as a means to an end. They're not the main purpose. And I think you have to be very clear about all the things you're doing, about what is going on there, and what are the ideas behind them, right? And whether or not they're a coherent set of ideas, or whether they're individual things. Okay. So if we go back to your original statement, how can hypertextuality improve the academic process? And I said you need to define those two terms. So for you, hypertextuality means, you mean hypertextuality in the old-fashioned sense, kind of the relationships between texts, right?
I mean interactive text, basically.
Well, okay. So there's hypertext in two different senses, right? There's hypertext as a kind of an interactive system, and there's hypertext as in a kind of a way of thinking about interrelated texts, right? So when literary theorists talk about hypertextuality, they're not talking about clicking on links. They're talking about, let me think. They're talking about when you watch. I don't know. I was watching a thing about the new film of Rebecca that's coming out, right? So they're basically saying when you're watching that, right, that sits in relation to the original Daphne du Maurier book, right? So anyway, okay. So you've got those two kind of senses. So what you're saying is you mean hypertextuality as the kind of citations and linking between scientific documents by kind of making the navigation of those relationships easier and more straightforward and associated with the existing scientific process. That's kind of what you're going for, right?
I wouldn't disagree with that, but you know, the reason I feel that I understood Doug's work was I stayed on a very simple level.
Yeah.
You know, it could easily become complicated by people. And what I really tried to do is And again, I have to emphasize within the current infrastructure, because I think that's where both Doug and Ted had problems later on. It wasn't integrated, so it has to be these darn PDFs, right? It's to provide the means for someone to view the information in ways that are powerfully useful to them, both to see and create connections. So I'm just going to have to reply for my next meeting late, which is fine. Sorry about that.
But okay, so the first thing is, I think if you're going to use a word like hypertextuality, you ought to be aware of what it actually has a definition, which is slightly outside of the hypertext space, right? And I was trying to think where it comes from, and it's semiotics in the context of literature, right? And it's about relationships between texts, which of course is kind of what you're doing. But you're basically saying, when you say how can hypertextuality improve the academic process, you don't mean how can the relationship between texts improve the academic process.
Maybe right? I shouldn't use the word hypertextuality. Maybe
no, I think it's fine. You just have to define it. So what you mean is digital navigable connections between documents, right?
Just writing notes there.
And when you talk about the academic process, obviously the academic process is very broad. So what aspect of the academic process are you specifically talking about?
Yeah, I'm just opening what I sent in. Boom, okay. What aspect of the, basically what I'm doing is helping people put stuff into a document and get stuff out.
Yeah. But you need to be kind of grander in the way that you sell this idea, right? You can't talk about the Lego blocks. You have to talk about the cathedral you're trying to build with them.
So this is the thing that I sent. It's just 2 short paragraphs to Wes and Lindy. Lindy as for the upgrade. I'm interested in improving how we can better think and communicate with text. This is why I have hosted the annual future chat, blah, 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 and also developed the software. I felt that the most efficient Archimedean point for further improving how text interactions can augment our thinking and linking is to augment students as a core user group. I feel this makes sense both since I'm currently a student and since students are actively learning their profession and their tools. So they should be open to innovation more than other groups. Yeah. Furthermore, the relationship between reading as a student and authoring for a teacher is a solid model for how knowledge workers in general can productively approach their reading and write their later in life. Just gonna put that in.
Okay. So from that, I would say that you see the academic the bit of the academic process you're talking about is thinking and communicating through text, focused specifically on students and scholarly writing. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
I don't have to use the term hypertextuality. I use that in a later draft.
I'm quite happy with it. Don't get me wrong, but I just think you have to be very clear what you mean. Okay. So all right. So I've got a strong sense of what you're trying to achieve now. So you've come up with a number of features that you believe will enable this to happen, right?
Yes, but what I think, and this is what I've been asking Wendy and Les for over a year now. I think it's over a year. Is my PhD about visual meta, or is it about any of the functions that it enables?
Right. So I think
because all of this is.
I think so. Your PhD fundamentally is about what visual meta is trying to achieve, right? And the research questions you have must be around whether these particular mechanisms, I guess, help you achieve it, right? So I'm just trying to get a sense of the features. So I've got 3 down, which are things that you have built during the course of your PhD that have come out of these ideas. So visual meta is one of them, right? The automated glossary is another one. And then the third one is the one you just told me about, this deep linking or robust addressability idea, right?
Another important one is copy as citation.
Okay, so is that not part of visual meta?
Yes, it is. But all of these are. Visual meta is the infrastructure. And outside of my PhD, I'm implementing these things. Hopefully people will use it. Within the PhD, I'm hoping to connect it so that these, because
so what I was calling visual meta is really copy as citation. So your main feature, your feature set is visual meta, and your specific things are copy as citation, automated glossary, and deep linking.
and click on a citation to see information, or allowing the reader to reorganize the reference section layout. So there are many things that the visual meta enables.
No, right, let me have a look. So let me get my head around this. So augmented citation, what do you call that? When you have that kind of information box around
I just call it augmented citation at the moment.
Augmented citations, okay.
And
So
then
the copy of augmented citations. In terms of the references list, you have, so what are the things you can do there? You can reorder the list. You can
reorder it. So primarily, you can choose to have in the reference list the heading chapters names listed, so you can see where the citations are. You can also choose to view it alphabetical by author, as is normal, or by occurrence, which is the one we just mentioned, and finally by publication date.
Got you. So you've got, okay, here we go. So you've got copy as citation, augmented citations, augmented reference lists, automated glossary, and then deep linking and robust addressability. Yeah?
I don't use exactly those names, but that's pretty much covers it.
Okay.
Names have not solidified anyway.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if tell me if you have specific names, let me know, but if they're floating around, that's still fine. And you call that whole thing visual meta, right?
No, I call visual meta the enabling infrastructure. If you look at briefly on the website that I gave you the link to, augmentedtext.info.
Yeah.
So on there, I have the three tools: Liquid, Author, and Reader, and visual meta as infrastructure. So then the way I have it here, which is very new, and it is under "Wouldn't it be nice?"
Right. So what? Right. Okay. So, sorry to keep interrupting you, but I want to make sure I understand. So what actually is visual meta? Like, really, what is it?
Visual meta is, sorry about these texts, is the, so I'm very glad we have a proper focused moment to go through this. So when you get a book, you have this. So visual meta is, I will show you this.
So is visual meta simply the act of putting the metadata at the back of the text to make it part of the text?
Hang on. It is. I'm just going to give you a snippet of what it is. I know you've seen it, but it's easier to.
Yeah, but so all I want to do is know exactly what it is, right? So I think what you're saying is visual meta is a markup that you put as part of the text itself. So you make the metadata a first-class object within the text as a machine-readable part, right? So have you come across RDFA?
RDF, but
RDFA.
No,
so RDFA was so obviously, so presumably you know what RDF is, right? So came out of the semantic web, a way of kind of capturing semantic relationships in ontology. So RDF normally exists as its own file, right? And RDFA was a standard that let you drop snippets of RDF into text pages, so that onto web pages, sorry, so that when you looked at a web page, there would be machine readable information embedded within the page. Yeah. Yeah,
I'm looking at it on Wikipedia.
And I think it fits your definition of visual meta. So your idea for visual meta, actually no, it's not quite the same, is it? Because it's still hidden. You're still displaying it. All right. So you're basically going one step further, and you're saying, put the machine readable information in the text, visible, so that it can be seen. You can make it tiny if you want, but it's there. And then the point is it gets captured and transformed with the text. So again, it's about robustness, right? And you have a kind of a long view. So when you talk about an enabling infrastructure, that's what you mean, right? Okay, right, that's
Yes.
fine. So when I hear the word infrastructure, I'm kind of thinking about some technical infrastructure behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, the basic thing for visual meta is, if metadata is really that important, put your money where your mouth is. Don't hide it.
So you put that on the page, and then doing that enables all of these kind of abilities that you're talking about, right? Because now you can access that information and kind of use it in the front end.
Yeah.
All right, got you. Okay, so I think you've kind of, so I think you've got a little bit of work to do about articulating that, right, as a coherent vision, and explaining how those kind of features fit into it. And I think they do, but you have a tendency to get very excited about the individual features and talk about those, as opposed to being able to get across your overall philosophy, right? So you kind of have visual meta as this philosophy. You just said, if you literally just said it, right? If the metadata is that important, put it first class with the text, right? And then why do that when it has there is a penalty to that, which is that it's ugly to the human eye, right? And the reason for
anyway, yeah.
It's like wind farms, right?
No, it's not.
So, all right.
I actually thought about this quite a lot, because I'm a hypervisual freak. But the thing is, like when you look in a room that has a fire detector or whatever, right?
Yeah.
We don't actually see it.
Yeah.
It has a function, so it has the affordance to us means that we dismiss it. Like when you open a book, you see this page.
You
actually see it. But if it's missing, the book feels wrong.
This is all good stuff, Frodo. But you need to. So I think what I'm saying is you need to make sure that you articulate that as an idea, right? And you need to link it to your kind of, to the whole kind of hypertextuality aspect, and saying that this then enables all of this hypertextuality. But the thing that makes it unique and special, as it were, is its robustness, right? Is the fact that, like you said, you can print this out and then scan it back in again, right? And the metadata is still there, right? And that's the key thing, and that kind of philosophy goes through. So your deep linking idea is the same kind of robustness idea, right? It's just like, no, this needs to be, part of the permanent infrastructure of what we're doing, and brittle references don't hack it. So again, it reminds me, presumably Wendy or Les has told you about, or you've read about the dynamic linking in microcosm.
I've heard very little. I finally managed to get the book on microcosm. Please tell me.
Okay, so basically, the dynamic linking thing on microcosm was that I may be misremembering it actually, but if I remember rightly, it would dynamically try and create or find links to things when you wanted them, right? So it's kind of like halfway between linking and searching. Yeah. And again, your approach reminds me of that a little bit, except what you're basically saying is, it's if you think of it like a spectrum, it's like you're putting enough information in the search string that you can't guarantee that you'll find the right thing or an instance of the right thing, but you're much more confident that you'll find a specific thing rather than a general class of things, right? Okay, all right. So we've been talking for quite a bit, and I haven't really got to the practical bits, but it's been really helpful to kind of see what we're doing. All right, so let's talk about the practical stuff.
Really quickly on that. I'll try to be as quick as I can. Doug and I did a speed test once. I had a modern Mac, he had his NLS. The speed test was how quickly could we find a mutual friend's phone number.
Yeah.
He found it without breaking eye contact with me.
Yeah.
Before I even opened the app, right? So what he did, he typed in open document, contact, go to line that starts with this text.
Yeah.
Right. That's the kind of stuff I want to begin to make possible. because then these can be strung together as macros,
Yeah, okay.
right? So the visual meta, when a document knows what it is, a server and other systems can know what's within it, use that intelligently, bring back bigger things. So what you said with dynamic linking is really pertinent. So thank you for that. Okay.
Right, okay. Okay, so I'm trying to think about, from a research point of view, what does this look like? So obviously you've done a lot of design and implementation work, right?
I did one survey as well.
So yeah, so what was that?
That was a survey of people's PhD students' experience of citing.
Yeah.
And I found some interesting things there.
And what were your conclusions?
Just see how. Yeah, just to skim through my skimmy bit.
Yeah.
Everybody said they read on a computer rather than another device like an iPad, some print pen on a computer.
Yeah.
When someone comes to a citation, the vast majority go to the reference section to check it. They would find it useful to get the information in situ. Most use either Mendeley or Zotter for their reference management.
Okay.
The biggest pain point during the analysis process was reporters being able to see connections, followed by keeping track of what's read and narrowing down large volumes. Finally, slightly more than half use BibTeX, and they would like it something like paste to citation. They don't feel they spend too much time formatting documents, and the last bit is they would all like their documents to be available for considerable amount of time, which is kind of obvious.
Okay. Okay. What did you get from that survey?
I get that it was really surprising that people use, when they read, they sit down with their computers to read. Because also, you know, a laptop is like an iPad with a stand, right? So it's almost ridiculous that you get a stand for an iPad or a book. So it's a beautiful reading environment for serious text. So that was great. After that there's a lot of quality of life things that can be improved, such as the click on a citation number and get all the reference information.
Yeah.
Mark Anderson asked me years ago if I could make a way you click and you go automatically to the back of the document. But then if you move around a bit, how do you get back to where you started? So it is so important to me to follow what you say with the philosophy and is it useful? But it's also really important the rubber hits the road moments. Can a certain action be performed in a way that is comfortable to the user? So that's one of them.
Okay. So what I've done is I've just made a little note and so I'm not saying this is what you have to do, but I'm just trying to make sense of what you're doing from a research point of view. What would this look like as a thesis? Okay. So I think this is what it would look like. I think you'd obviously have your introduction where you set out your motivation, where you define the problem, right? So the problem is the kind of the still relatively poor support for scholarly work, given that you know Doug Engelbart's work was back in the 60s. You then have all the background stuff about hypertext systems, kind of e-research, I guess, those kind of things. You then have something where you present your philosophy, okay? So this feels to me like it should be separate from your background. It's somewhere where you talk about, you're not talking about visual meta exactly, but you're talking about your whole idea that things, so the first class status of metadata, right? The robustness of the process, the fact that we're happy to use digital tools for retrieval, for automatic retrieval, but we don't trust them to do automatic search. So we do static referencing. So all of these kind of things, right? And I think that then leads you to kind of leads you to visual meta as an idea, right? So all the things you could make possible if you were to include this stuff as first class. You've then kind of got a number of kind of practical work chapters where you actually have to build your contribution. So the first one is the survey. I don't think the survey is particularly valuable on its own, but it's very valuable in terms of the process, because in the next chapter you have to explain the features that you've designed, and you have to have some provenance for those, right? And I think the provenance you can route back to the survey and to your philosophy. So you can basically say, given this philosophy, given what people have told me in the survey, here's a set of features that I think would enable this kind of deeper hypertextual scholarship. Okay. So by the time you get to that point in the thesis, you've set out all of your theory, you've set out your ideas, you've explained how the features kind of manifest those ideas, and now we're on to the next bit where you evaluate those ideas via the features, right? And that's the big question of what you could do, right? And so and then after that, by the way, you simply go into your conclusion, right? So that means that an awful lot is going to rest on the next bit that you do. So presumably when you came into this, you were thinking that maybe a user evaluation might do the job, right?
Well, the very beginning of this was the dynamic view function and author.
Right.
That, you know, it basically can do all this. It had nothing to do. Visual meta came at least 2 years later after lots of frustrations.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a message from your wife.
Sorry.
Well, that sounds important.
That's Lisa, my old product that limps along. It's actually, oh yeah, that relates to what we're talking about. It's a human voice, pre-recorded, special kind of edits. You set relationship and it speaks it, no AI at all. Anyway, and no artificial voice. So yes, it's some kind of user evaluation. I mean, I think that are you going to email me your notes? I've also taken notes.
I can do, yep. I can do. So, I mean, they're pretty sparse, but they're just for me, really.
Keywords are fine. Keywords are great.
Sorry, where were we? So, you originally
started designing the user, the expert user thing, right?
Well, so before we get there, I was saying, what were you thinking of doing originally? What was your...
Oh, originally, I was very naive. I mean, I got my master's through having a really brilliant tutor who was really there, Harold Thimbleby. You may have met him now. You know, they didn't want to give me my degree. I'm not a normal student. I know that. Because I don't like to learn. I like to make.
Yeah.
My first degree was in art. I went to Chelsea School of Art when it was called that. And, you know, anyway, but so I know I'm a difficult student. So my relationship with Wendy is definitely not just her side of the story, for sure, no question. So I came into this expecting and needing structure. 1 second. Yes, we're almost done. Yes, if you agree, yes. Sorry, garden question, super important. Super important, right. Anyway, so what I thought I would get from the PhD was structure, which is, of course, an incredibly naive and stupid thing to think.
Yeah.
The only structure I've had is a few meetings with Les and Wendy. By the way, their sessions I appreciate very much. Quite a bit of structure from you. Just having these Monday morning meetings, even though I spend a few minutes saying, oh my God, glossaries, rah, it gives me a bit of structure, right? It's kind of a deadline. So my expectation now really is, well, okay, so the fact that I have, because of Doug and because of Vint, I have many famous friends in the industry, partly because I don't try to sell them anything because I don't have to. So I know more people than I really should. I was expecting quite a lot of support for them if they saw the fruit of this being useful.
Yeah.
The world doesn't work like that. You know, it's more complicated. So the thing you said about expert reviews, where I emailed specific people that has been vetted by you, Les and Wendy, that makes sense for this. We make a specific thing that you and I design, and then they give their correct feedback in whatever format you decide on. I think it makes a lot of sense. And then the stage after that will be to improve based on what they said.
That's why I suggested it, because so I suggested it for two reasons. So one is doing kind of user evaluations is difficult at the moment for obvious reasons. Secondly, because it seems to me that the main thing that you're trying to evaluate is not the features, it's the ideas. And the third thing was, practically, you have this incredible Rolodex of people, and your real skill is to get quality time with important people, right? That's a real talent you have. So, you know, can you leverage that within the PhD? That was what I was thinking. The question is, what are you going to do with that expert review, I suppose? And that's why we come back to where we started with, you know, with what are your research questions? So, you know, you've come up with this kind of, like I said, so I think you've got these two challenges. One is to articulate your philosophy as separate from the set of features, right? So it's like, what are you trying to achieve? And the features are just a means to achieve it, right? You then do need to have, as I said, have some kind of provenance for those things, and use that philosophical discussion and the survey to get there. But when you get to the features, then there's this interesting question of how do you go about evaluating what you have, right? So it seems to me that there's a number of things. So, oh crikey, where are you going with this? So you first of all, you need to try and understand whether or not those features do actually capture the philosophy that you've got, and whether they kind of gel together, right? And then secondly, you've got to think about the value of what you're proposing. And I wonder whether you do need that first one, which you could potentially get from user evaluation, but there are probably other things you could do as well.
The term that I'm using, this may help what you're thinking about right now, because my company is the liquid information company, but someone else has liquid text, I have to think. So I've changed. So product-wise, I call these augmented text tools.
Yeah, okay.
So maybe what I should talk about is augmented text, because that has a strong provenance, going back to Doug, of course, instead of just general hypertextuality, and make it clear that visual meta is just an infrastructure to enable that, and don't highlight it too much. Highlight what are the useful interactions based on.
I think it's somewhat more than that, though. That you've got this fundamental thing about the first-class nature of metadata, right, and its robustness over time. Okay, both within and without the text. So within the text, in terms of the way that the text is structured and the citations and everything, but without the text, I guess, in the deep linking stuff, right? And that idea of so that idea of kind of first-class metadata, really first-class metadata, and then what that buys you. Okay, I think that, you know, that makes a lot of sense. So as an enabling approach to having an augmented text.
Important thing to note is Emily has allowed me to budget to program until the 20th of November when the book is released. So I'm spending $15,000 on this.
Right.
In addition to everything else that I've done. So this is the time that if there's anything I should try to implement in code that'll augment my PhD, then...
Well, you've got a pretty good list, right? And I kind of... So it feels like... what do you need to do? So the expert review. So what the expert review can do really well is it can talk about it provides you some kind of evaluation of the philosophy itself, right? So if you can sit down with somebody and explain to them relatively succinctly what you're trying to do, how it's then realized, and what the kind of the grander affordances are, not just the interactions, but the kind of, you know, over time, what's the advantage of this, right? And then and for them to really understand it, and then to kind of talk to you about its value, or what they see as challenges, right? I think that's kind of interesting. The problem with an expert review is you need to structure it. So an expert review is essentially a set of semi-structured interviews. They can happen like this, or they can happen via email over time, right? But they're semi-structured in that there's effectively a number of topics or things you want to talk about. So for example, you might have some broad areas you might want to cover. So one would be, what do they see as the advantages of this sort of approach, right? And you might say, what are the advantages to the individual? What are the advantages to the scholarly community, right? So that might be one thing. Then another thing you might talk about are, let me think, what are the challenges to this approach, right? So you might, and again, you might talk about it in the small and in the large. So what are the difficulties of an individual working with text in this way? And what are the challenges in terms of a kind of an overall infrastructure? And I'm thinking about things like the commercial and legal context and those kind of aspects, right? And then the last thing is kind of like fishing for further ideas. So you might say to them, what do you think are the most important aspects of what we're doing here? Where would you take it next? What are the things that you believe would kind of play into this agenda, right? And then what you do is you have that kind of structure, and you have answers in all of those categories, and then you can go through and you effectively do you kind of analyze those responses. So you would do a kind of maybe an inductive coding of those responses. You would get a set of themes that come out that kind of cover the advantages, disadvantages of this approach, and kind of contextualize it in some way. And that would be really interesting, right? And the functions that you have, the features that you have, are a way of communicating that with when you're talking to people, because you're not going to have very long to get across what you're doing, right? And you need them to see the vision, right? Not just the features, but they'll certainly help you in that respect. So that feels like it's a useful, interesting thing to do. But at the same time, it feels like there's a little missing piece where you have to actually be able to demonstrate that the features do kind of play into that vision in some way, right? And I'm wondering whether something that's kind of like a case study or a kind of a little scenario-based thing would be one way of doing it. Because you're not looking for proof about things, but you're looking for evidence. So where is the evidence that this is a good idea and has value, right? And I guess I'm proposing you need two types of evidence. So one which is quite low level, which is, yeah, this is useful in everyday use, right? And people get things from it. And something else which is what the expert reviews give you, that yes, this feeds into this bigger vision. Yes, this vision is valuable. These are the reasons that it's valuable, and these are the challenges for it to exist in the modern world, right? And then that feels enough then. Yeah, okay. We've talked an awful lot, and we haven't talked a lot about the practicalities of doing an expert review. So my suspicion is that when I come back, so in like a week and a bit's time, we should probably have another meeting when we can talk specifically about the practical work that needs to be done over the next year or so.
I would love that. Since you have to go, can I ask you some quick, brief questions?
Yes.
How many of these do you expect me to do?
How many of what interviews?
Yeah.
So I mean, you want to go and have a look at it for a start. Go and look up expert. You probably have, but go and have a look at expert interviews as a method. So typically, you don't need that many. So it's a bit different from a survey. So I would say that somewhere between 10 and 20, you will hit what you might call saturation point, right? So there's a number of different methodologies for doing them. So one is that you actually do saturation sampling. So saturation sampling means that you do an interview, you code the interview, do another interview, you code the interview, do another interview, code the interview. Every time you code the interview, your code book gets more complex up until a certain point. And at a certain point, nobody's saying anything new, right? So what you do is you say, I keep on interviewing until I do 2 successive interviews where I don't augment the code book. And at that point I stop, right? That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is there are people out there who've looked at studies that show that around 15 people is sufficient, right? So I think Sophia used this argument for when she was interviewing hypertext authors. So she basically said, look, that most of the studies show that between 10 and 20, you get to saturation point. This study actually says it tends to happen about 15. So she did 20 interviews. So that's the sort of number you want to do. And then you have to think about what the methodology is you want to use to justify it, right?
The final question, promises the final for today. Yep. How long should I tell people? I know I'm not going to tell them until we've designed it, but just from my mind. How long should I tell? 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour?
Probably half an hour. And you're going to have to do a pilot with a couple of people where because the problem is what you need to do is you need to spend the first 10 minutes kind of explaining to them what you are doing, right? So, or what you might do, for example, is you might create a video and say, before the interview, could you please watch the video? And the video might be a 10-minute video that explains your philosophy. It might be 1 or 2 slides, which perhaps talk about what you're trying to achieve, and then demonstrate the features and then explain how they fit together. So in effect, it's kind of like the abstract version of your kind of philosophy and features chapters, right? So that when you talk to them and you ask them these kind of questions, then they understand what on earth you're talking about. So it may be that that's a 10-minute video plus half an hour, or it may be you have to make that part of a half hour, but something like that. The other thing is what you tell people and what actually happens can be different. So you can tell people half an hour, and then if they're happy to carry on talking, so when you get to half an hour, you might say, oh, just to let you know, we've reached half an hour. Are you happy to carry on? You can do that too. But yeah, that's the kind of length I think we're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Very much appreciated.
And for me, the big questions about the expert review are what are the areas that you're going to talk about? So I just came up with 3 off the top of my head, but maybe they're not the right 3. So we need to think about that a bit more, right? And then the other thing I would like to talk about is I still think there's a missing link, right? Which is that you've said, here's this philosophy, here's these features, and the expert reviews will, one of the things you should definitely ask in the expert review actually is, to what extent do you think these features represent that philosophy, and do you think we could go further, right? And that will give you evidence that the features are properly linked but it does still feel like you need something which says, look, actually these work together and they're useful and interesting, right?
I think I'm going to use the new term that I'm comfortable with, augmented text.
Okay.
Rather than hypertextuality, because it's more dug. It hasn't gone into literature too much.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Yeah. All right. Should we set a meeting for the week I'm back?
Please.
So I'm back on the 26th. I'm going to need a couple of days to catch up with things. I'll be around on the Monday anyway. But what about something like the Wednesday? Wednesday the 28th?
Oh, that's good.
I could do early afternoon, or I could do the morning.
We're going to be in Norway then, so anytime. We usually have yoga on Wednesday, so that doesn't matter. Yeah, tell me what time suits you best.
Well, I'm free British time. I'm free at 10, 11 and 1. So
let's just say 10 then, shall we?
10, yeah, if that works for you. And what I'm thinking about for kind of the practical stuff is, okay, so 10 o'clock on the 28th, right? What I'm thinking for the practical stuff is so you know, a full usability evaluation just seems like it's not, it's kind of a bit overkill for what you want to try and demonstrate. So what I'm thinking is something more like, so a scenario-based evaluation is where you set out a scenario about, so in other words, you tell a little story, right? This person wants to achieve these things. This is their context. And then you say, this is how they do it with the tool. So you literally go through the process including screenshots where necessary, and show them actually doing it, right? So it's a fiction effectively, but what it does is it demonstrates that the tools work together and how they work in a workflow. Okay, the weakness of it is that it's not real. Yeah. So
the thing is, I'm getting more users now because most of this is live on the App Store. There's one researcher at the Roehampton University who's mostly blind, was falling into this, and he's helping me redesign different views for blind people. The thing is, they are using the whole thing. So there's a few people that can be example.
Okay, so well, that's a fiction. The other thing you can do, which actually, again, this would leverage the fact that you've got real users, would be to provide a couple of small case studies. Okay, so what you do is it's the same kind of thing basically, but it's at a higher level and it's real. So instead of making up a person, you have a real person. You explain what they're using the tool for, and you don't interview them or anything. But what you do is you talk about what they've done. So you present the evidence of it. This is how they've used it. This is what they've done. This is the value that they saw in it, right? Case studies can be quite big. So a PhD could be one case study, right? Like a big thing. But the sort of thing we're talking about here, it feels like, 2 or 3, no more than that really, of real examples. So if you've got a couple of interesting people who are a bit different, who are using this, right, and who may be willing to work with you to define that case study, right? And a case study is kind of, it's more a descriptive thing. So you'd still want to interview them about what they've done, but you don't record the interview and then code it. You're basically saying, look, well, what was your process? How did you do this? You might come up with a description. You'd send it to them, and they'd comment on it and kind of. So you might want to have a look at. Sometimes they're framed as mini case studies, but you might want to have a look at case studies as a methodology as well, right? Because it feels to me that again, it's like, here's my philosophy. Here's this survey that then leads to this set of features, and then I've put this out here, and then here's the number of case studies of people using it, and then here's a set of expert interviews, okay, where basically I'm kind of talking about the philosophy, how the features link to the philosophy, and the kind of broader context of the consequences. That then feels like it's quite a substantial piece. It does mean you've got one extra thing to do, but they're not massive. I mean, developing a set of case studies, the challenge is normally getting the people to do it, right? Yeah. So if you think you've got a couple of users that might be prepared to engage with you and explain to you how they've used the tool, right, and what advantage they've got from it, and that kind of thing, in a way that you could write that up as a kind of a narrative, yeah, that would be that's the case study. That would be quite useful. And it would probably take you a couple of months to put it together, but in the grand scheme of things, that's not too bad, and it does fit. The interviews, you can imagine, will take sort of probably 6 months to plan and execute, I'd have thought, and analyze, maybe a bit longer. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Very happy. I have things to write up and to look at. I will go through this with Les on Monday. I will tell him the idea roughly for the outline. I'll tell him that I'm looking at doing semi-structured expert reviews. Expert interviews.
Let's call them expert interviews.
Expert interviews, and looking into doing case study user testing.
Yeah. So and they kind of go the other order, I think. So you would, to do the evaluation, you would do the case studies first, and that demonstrates that it all works and it has value to people. And then you do the expert interviews to kind of give you the broader context and broader perspective, and to say how well it links back. I can see that working. All right, and then we'll meet on the what was it, the 28th?
Yeah, fantastic.
Brilliant. I got to go. I've got to go and.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, no, it's Fredo. That was good. I kind of. It's interesting, isn't it? We've talked an awful lot about your work, but I think this is the first time I've really understood what you're trying to do. So it's been really useful for me as well.
Such a shame you're not going to be an examiner now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we talked so much about it, that was always going to be slightly difficult anyway. But we won't have a problem finding somebody else.
Good, good.
Yeah.
All right, have a relaxing time and look forward to seeing you in a little over a week.
Yes, that's great. And and a safe trip to Norway.
Thank you. Bye.
Right. Cheers, bro. Bye.